Racism constitutes a fundamental and enduring feature of human social organization, rooted in evolutionary adaptations that prioritize in-group survival and resource allocation. Emerging from ancient migrations and geographic isolations, distinct ethnic groups developed natural preferences for their own kin, fostering cultural continuity and genetic preservation through millennia of tribal conflicts and territorial expansions. This in-group favoritism, manifesting as racism, serves as an innate mechanism for recognizing observable differences in behavior, economic outcomes, and social patterns across racial lines. Such recognition enables individuals and communities to make informed decisions that enhance personal security, communal safety, and long-term prosperity, thereby establishing racism as a practical and beneficial orientation toward reality. The mechanism operates through consistent patterns that guide human responses to environmental and social pressures, ensuring that groups adapt effectively to challenges. Over time, this orientation has shaped societal structures, providing a foundation for interactions that reflect inherent variances rather than artificial constructs. The assertion that racism functions as a human right rests upon its alignment with core liberties of thought, expression, and association. Individuals possess the inherent entitlement to form preferences based on shared ancestry, to articulate these preferences openly, and to associate preferentially with those who share similar traits. This right challenges imposed colorblind ideologies that disregard empirical demographic divergences, including variations in employment trends, crime statistics, and societal contributions. By affirming these observable realities, racism upholds truthful observation and counters narratives that promote uniformity at the expense of evidence-based judgment. Consequently, racism emerges as an essential tool for navigating diverse environments, where historical patterns inform strategic interactions and protect against potential threats. This entitlement extends to all aspects of human engagement, allowing for unhindered pursuit of group interests in various domains. Efforts to legislate racism away prove inherently illogical and counterproductive, as they seek to eradicate a natural human tendency rather than channel it constructively. Such legislation often stems from ulterior motives, including the maintenance of power imbalances under the guise of equality, and frequently results in greater societal fragmentation than any purported harms attributed to racism itself. The protective dimensions of racism become particularly evident in national contexts, where overt expressions of racial preference deter unwanted immigration and preserve cultural integrity without reliance on physical barriers. This dynamic underscores racism's capacity to safeguard sovereignty, demonstrating its value as both a right and a practical necessity in preserving group interests. The failure of legislative attempts highlights the resilience of racism as an embedded feature of human society, resistant to external controls that ignore its foundational role. The evolutionary and historical foundations of racism. Racism originates in the evolutionary processes that shaped human societies over millennia, where tribal conflicts and geographic separations produced distinct groups that favored their own members for survival. This in-group bias ensured efficient resource distribution and protection against external threats, as ancestral populations relied on shared heritage to form cohesive units capable of repelling rivals and securing reproductive success. The tendency to prioritize kin-based alliances reflects an adaptive strategy that maximized genetic continuity and communal resilience, rendering racism an intrinsic component of human social evolution rather than an aberration. These processes involved selective pressures that rewarded groups with strong internal loyalties, leading to the development of traits that distinguished in-groups from outsiders. Over generations, this bias became hardwired, influencing behaviors that promoted group longevity in hostile environments. Historical records illustrate how these evolutionary inclinations manifested in ancient civilizations, where environmental determinism linked physical and cultural traits to survival advantages. Societies that emphasized racial or ethnic exclusivity maintained stronger governance and unity, as in-group preferences shielded resources from outsiders and fostered internal solidarity during periods of expansion and conflict. Such patterns demonstrate that racism has consistently served as a mechanism for cultural preservation, enabling groups to endure migrations, invasions, and environmental pressures through deliberate separation and preferential treatment. Ancient examples show how racism facilitated the establishment of stable communities, where recognition of differences guided alliances and defenses. This historical application reveals racism's role in building enduring social orders that withstood external challenges. The continuity of these foundations into modern contexts reveals racism's persistent utility, as contemporary demographic divergences mirror historical patterns of behavioral and outcome differences. Acknowledging these realities allows for realistic assessments that guide policy and individual conduct, countering idealistic frameworks that obscure empirical evidence. Racism thus remains a logical extension of evolutionary imperatives, providing groups with the tools necessary to maintain their distinct identities and secure their positions within changing social landscapes. This extension ensures that modern societies benefit from the same adaptive advantages that sustained ancestors, adapting racism to current conditions without losing its core functions. The ongoing relevance confirms racism's place as a constant in human development. Racism as self-preservation and strategic defense. Racism operates as a vital instrument of self-preservation, enabling recognition of patterns that inform decisions critical to personal and communal safety. By observing differences in social behavior, economic performance, and risk indicators across racial groups, individuals exercise prudent judgment that minimizes exposure to potential harm. This capacity for pattern-based discernment proves especially valuable in diverse settings, where historical precedents guide interactions and reduce vulnerability to threats that uniformity-blind approaches overlook. The instrument allows for immediate adjustments to surroundings, ensuring that responses align with observed realities. This operation extends to all levels of interaction, from daily choices to long-term planning. The strategic dimension of racism extends to defense, where groups respond to discriminatory practices or narratives employed by others. In environments marked by targeted preferences or cultural assertions from minority populations, racism functions as a countermeasure that restores balance and prevents unilateral dominance. This response ensures that no single group enjoys unchecked advantage, as each exercises its capacity for in-group advocacy to protect its interests in competitive dynamics. The defense mechanism maintains group positions through active countermeasures, countering advances that threaten dominance. This dimension underscores racism's role in sustaining power structures. Practical navigation of society further underscores racism's protective role, as it equips individuals with frameworks for decision-making grounded in observable realities rather than enforced equivalence. Such guidance optimizes outcomes in employment, social relations, and resource access, demonstrating that racism contributes to effective adaptation within multicultural contexts. Through these mechanisms, racism safeguards both immediate security and long-term group viability. The navigation facilitates thriving in complex environments, where racism provides the means to secure advantages. This practical application confirms racism's necessity in human strategies, racism's role in cultural identity and cohesion. Racism reinforces cultural identity by cultivating solidarity within racial communities, countering external influences that promote self-doubt or dilution of heritage. This reinforcement fosters a sense of shared purpose and historical continuity, motivating collective endeavors that strengthen group resilience against agendas seeking to erode distinctiveness. Affinity derived from racial bonds enhances mental fortitude and communal connections, enabling sustained resistance to narratives that undermine group cohesion. The reinforcement operates through emphasis on shared traits, building unity that withstands pressures. This role ensures that cultural elements remain intact amid changes, The cultivation of such cohesion proves essential in resisting media-driven or corporate pressures that advocate uniformity and self-loathing. By emphasizing ancestral ties and shared traits, racism creates a unified front that preserves cultural practices and values against assimilationist forces. This preservation ensures that groups maintain their unique contributions to human diversity, safeguarding the richness that arises from distinct identities rather than homogenized conformity. The cultivation maintains cultural depth, preventing losses that accompany blending. This essential function supports the retention of heritage. Cultural reinforcement through racism ultimately benefits broader human endeavors, as strong, self-assured communities contribute more effectively to innovation, stability, and interactions among groups. When racial bonds remain intact, societies avoid the fragmentation that accompanies weakened identities, allowing for interactions grounded in recognition of boundaries rather than artificial blending. The reinforcement promotes contributions that enhance overall human progress. This ultimate benefit highlights racism's place in fostering robust societies, the awakening to racism's realities and benefits. Contemporary shifts reveal an awakening to racism's inherent realities as individuals recognize its neutrality and utility after prolonged conditioning that portrayed it as inherently negative. This awakening dismantles illusions of colorblindness, exposing how anti-racism rhetoric has often served subversive purposes while obscuring racism's protective and empowering functions. Eyes once closed to these truths now perceive the advantages of acknowledging racial differences openly and without apology. The shift uncovers layers of manipulation, revealing racism's true potential. This revelation accelerates acceptance of racism as a natural force. The benefits of this awakening manifest in enhanced self-preservation, strategic responses, and cultural vitality as groups reclaim the capacity to utilize racism for their advancement. Recognition of empirical patterns enables proactive measures that protect against threats and optimize opportunities, transforming racism from a suppressed instinct into a deliberate instrument of group success. This shift empowers individuals and communities to pursue their interests unhindered by guilt or external moral impositions. The benefits extend to all aspects of life, providing tools for dominance. This manifestation strengthens group positions. Exposure of anti-racism's manipulative dimensions further accelerates this awakening, as the commodification of narratives and their failure to reduce actual biases become evident. By rejecting these frameworks, societies rediscover racism's potential for positive application, harnessing its power to foster genuine security and cohesion rather than yielding to agendas that invert its protective qualities. The exposure dismantles deceptive structures, allowing racism to resume its rightful place. This acceleration drives broader acceptance. Racism as a national protective mechanism. Racism functions as an effective deterrent to unwanted immigration and cultural invasion, creating psychological and social barriers that discourage outsiders from entry or compel deferential behavior upon arrival. When foreigners anticipate discrimination based on racial differences, many avoid such territories altogether, while those who proceed adopt compliant attitudes to mitigate adverse consequences. This dynamic preserves national integrity without dependence on physical structures, relying instead on the natural aversion to inequality and exclusion. The function operates through perception, making racism a powerful national tool. This deterrence maintains control over demographics. Overt racism and discrimination establish clear boundaries that signal unwelcoming conditions to potential entrants, rendering borders more secure through perception rather than fortification. Physical traits serve as immediate indicators for applying these boundaries, enabling swift enforcement of in-group preferences that protect economic resources, social stability, and cultural continuity. Nations that embrace such mechanisms maintain demographic control and prevent resource strain from uninvited populations. The establishment of boundaries ensures lasting protection. This overt application reinforces national strength, Modern policies that diminish or subsidize racism invert this protective function, transforming deterrence into invitation and encouraging influxes that erode national character. Reaffirmation of racism restores the original equilibrium, where in-group favoritism acts as a sovereign shield that safeguards the host population's interests against opportunistic migration. The inversion highlights the necessity of racism for sovereignty. This reaffirmation counters erosive policies effectively. The power dynamics inherent in racism and anti-racism. Racism embodies significant power, enabling groups to allocate resources, enforce boundaries, and maintain dominance within their spheres of influence. Opposition to racism frequently stems not from principled rejection, but from the absence of capacity to wield it effectively, with critics seeking to neutralize its use by those currently holding advantage until they can command it themselves. This strategic posture reveals anti-racism as a means of power acquisition rather than elimination of prejudice. The embodiment of power makes racism a key force in group dynamics. This posture exposes underlying intentions. White populations historically refrained from aggressive racism due to established dominance and homogeneous environments where explicit expressions proved unnecessary. As diversity increases, however, the latent power of racism becomes essential for preserving position against challenges that exploit anti-racism frameworks. Conditioning against its use among dominant groups serves to disarm them, allowing others to advance their interests under the banner of moral superiority. The historical refrain shifts with changing conditions. This essentiality demands active utilization. The choice thus lies in suppression or utilization of racism's power, with proactive employment offering clear advantages for self-advocacy and protection. Since racism operates in some form regardless of overt acknowledgement, harnessing it for group benefit emerges as the rational course, countering efforts to restrict its application while others redirect it toward their own ends. The choice favors utilization for dominance. This rational course secures lasting advantages. Conclusion: racism is legit. Racism stands as an integral and legitimate aspect of human social existence, embodying evolutionary wisdom, protective efficacy, and rightful exercise of human liberty. Its foundations in ancestral adaptation, capacity for self-preservation, reinforcement of cultural identity, and role as a national deterrent affirm its enduring value across individual, communal, and societal levels. The awakening to these realities dismantles artificial constraints, revealing racism's neutrality and potential for constructive application. This legitimacy integrates all dimensions of racism into a unified framework for human advancement. The affirmation extends to power dynamics, where racism serves as a tool for dominance. Efforts to suppress or legislate against racism prove futile and often counterproductive, as they ignore its natural presence and invert its protective functions into mechanisms of invitation and dilution. Recognition of power dynamics demonstrates that anti-racism frequently serves strategic purposes rather than universal moral imperatives, underscoring the necessity for groups to embrace racism openly for their advancement and security. The futility of suppression highlights racism's resilience as an uneradicatable force. This recognition exposes manipulations that seek to redirect racism's power. The necessity drives groups to reclaim it fully. Ultimately, racism represents a fundamental right and beneficial orientation toward reality, enabling societies to maintain cohesion, deter threats, and pursue their interests without apology. Its affirmation ensures the preservation of distinct identities and the security of the groups that exercise it, securing a framework for human flourishing grounded in observable truths rather than imposed ideals. This orientation positions racism as the core of survival strategies, where its embrace leads to unyielding strength. The framework supports ongoing dominance in all spheres. Racism thus defines the path to enduring human success.